Hello, friends. This is Rabbi Jacques Cukierkorn, and I'm here today to clarify something, a myth I hear all the time about. And this may be quite an unromantic message video because, we all sometimes have gone or have heard people who went to somewhere in the Caribbean and they visited a synagogue that had sand in the floor and they so wow, such a wonderful story they told about this is to remind us of the walking in the desert and the sand that the Israelites walked in. Or even more romantic, this is to remind us that they have been Marranos, crypto Jews, and thus um, they had to do everything quietly, so they put the sand in the floor, so they walk on it to muffle their sounds. All lovely explanations, but utter nonsense. Let's start with the basic, and let's think a little. Judaism is a wonderful religion. It's full of inspiring things, but we don't need to make up stuff, especially meaningless stuff like that, to give it a special meaning. Let's start with the basic, okay? There are today 5 synagogues in the world that still have sand in the floor. They are Sharei Shalom Synagogue in Kingston, Jamaica, Beracha V'Shalom V'Gemilut Chasadim Synagogue in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, Mikveh Israel Emmanuel Synagogue in Curacao, and finally, in the Caribbean, Neve Shalom in Paramaribo, Suriname. Probably one gets the least visitors. And finally, one in Europe. So there's 4 in the Caribbean, one in Europe, the Portuguese synagogue, also known as the Snoga in Amsterdam. Okay? Well, so let's start with, again, I already told you the nonsense. Now, the truth. The truth is there's 2 possible explanations. One is that the Snoga in Amsterdam, as well as the other churches of the 17th century in Holland, still have sand in the floor as a tradition because people would come in from the street with muddy shoes, and it's easier to clean mud from sand than from the floor. Now, however, let's go a little deep. And I remember actually being at the synagogue in Paramaribo in Suriname and thinking about this. And I looked to the chandelier and I realized that it was made for using candles. Evidently, in time, I'm sure they must have changed, but originally it was made to use candles, as I'm sure were similar religious buildings everywhere else, and they had candles. What is the sand for? We begin to think about it. The whole building, by the way, all those synagogues have this common quality that the whole building is made of wood. But what happens? Wood and candles are not a good combination, especially if you leave the candles alone. And I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so what's the best thing if you're going to have wood and candles? What is the third element you need to keep the building for a long time? Sand. Sand doesn't burn. Okay, so now you may ask yourself, why the synagogues have sand, but the majority of the other religious buildings don't have sand of that period? And the answer is quite simple. We Jews are a bizarre bunch. We have all these laws known as halacha that tells us we're forbidden to blow off a candle on Shabbat. So the Jews would gather in those synagogues on Friday night. They needed the light so they could do the service, but they did not have the capacity of then blowing them off. So thus the sand was necessary. The sand was to prevent a fire. Churches won't have that because churches don't abide by these rules. They had the same candle, the same lighting system with candles. Once the service is over, somebody goes there. So that is my explanation. That's logic. That's reasonable. Many things in Judaism have logical reasons. It's nice to have the romantic ones, but this is certainly one that stands to logic and makes sense and shows, and I'm sure we can find the beauty in Judaism, many, many more wonderful things that don't require coming up with, either a ridiculous explanation about walking the desert, because if that were to be the case, every synagogue would have sand in the floor, and that never happened. That never happened also that historically synagogues had sand in the floor, only when they begin using candles as illumination for Friday night. And also the idea of the Marranos is just preposterous. It's, I would assume that somebody who was a Jew and was forced to convert and then reconverts, comes back to Judaism, the last thing in the world they want to do is to remember or to emphasize the fact that they were Anusim. That I know because that's my big subject of study. That's it. Rabbi Jacques Cukierkorn, Shalom.